This is Scott Richmond.
And Arnie Sherman.
You're listening to What Do You Know on Newstalk KGVO, AM 1290 and 1015 FM. Good morning, Arnie. How are you?
Good morning, Scott. What do you know?
Not enough.
Today's show, we're going to be talking to Hollywood executive producer, Marra Gad.
I love it. I love the name Marra Gad.
Yes, it's a good name for a Hollywood producer. It's simple, it's easy, you can fit it on a small business card. Yeah. But I was thinking, movies. We've talked about movies before, but we really haven't talked much about our interest in movies. Do you have a top 10 or a top 5 off the top of your head? What are your favorite movies? I want to get us in the mood for a movie show and a Hollywood show.
Okay, well, I'm a comedy person. I like Animal House. Okay, my tastes tend to run highbrow.
Right, that's very duck soup. Does duck soup go along with that? The Meatballs. You're just doing a whole Bill Murray shtick.
Lost in Translation.
Yeah,
another
good
great
movie.
Film.
Good, yeah.
But I like those types. I like whimsical. I like funny.
Escapist. Yeah.
I don't want to see. You're
not going to go watch Schindler's List 15 times. Remember, Woody Allen in all of his movies used to take his date to see some documentary on the Nazi takeover of France.
A light movie.
Yeah, a light movie. No, I mean you gotta figure that the movies that really resonate with you across your life are the ones when you're scanning through your the TV trying to figure out something to watch.
Right.
And you see a clip of something, you stop and you watch it, even though you've seen it so many times.
That's a mark of a great movie.
Right. So what are those movies for you?
Oh God, Arnie.
Okay, I'm going to give you some of mine.
Give me yours.
Okay, I'll give you some of mine.
By the way, the movie I was talking about was A Beautiful Life.
A Beautiful Life, yeah. Well, I could see why
I snooze during.
Yeah. It's a good way to put you to sleep when you have insomnia. For me, it's Godfather 1 and 2. If Godfather's on, you got to watch it.
Yep.
Blade Runner.
I
always like Blade
That's
Runner.
Out of left field.
Blade Runner's
Why?
Just because of it. It was ahead of its time. It has an interesting theme and message. There's been 2 or 3 variations of it. There was a producer's cut.
Is that Rutger Hauer?
Director's. Yeah, he played the the blonde replicant.
Right.
And they're going to do a remake or Blade Runner. A
reboot.
Yeah, Blade Runner 2, which I'm going to look forward to. The Matrix. That's my sort of mindless movie that I like to watch. One, all 3 of them even, but the first one in particular. My sort of schleppy, popcorn eating, not great reviewed movie, but one I like watching, nostalgia, is The Way We Were.
Oh.
Robert Redford, Barbra Streisand.
Right.
Just something about the time in my life when I first saw it and all of that sort of thing that makes that a meaningful movie.
That's the early 70s.
Yeah, Wizard of Oz.
Great film.
Great movie. 1939, but still watch it. It's still good. You never get tired of it. Even if you know all the words and all the scenes.
Yep.
Singing in the Rain as a musical, right? I mean, it was great. The dancing in it, the singing in it, the storyline. It was, it had all the elements. Gene Kelly at his prime. I thought that was a good movie.
No sports films. You're a sports fan.
Star Wars. I mean, that's not a sports, but I remember. Right. I remember when I saw that the first time in the theater, and they went into, jet drive or whatever, hyperdrive.
Okay.
Hyperspace. Raiders. Raiders of the Lost Ark combined every element of childhood movies and serials and cliffhangers were all built into one. And then probably, even though it's not that recent, sort of a game changer of a movie, Pulp Fiction.
Oh, yeah.
Which was, so I think those are, roughly my top 10. There are other movies for other reasons. Yeah, there are other movies for other reasons. There are other comedies. There are other, meaningful, movies. I always thought in terms of technical achievement, Saving Private Ryan, the first 10 minutes when they're on Normandy. Yeah. My uncle who we had on the show, who was at Guadalcanal, couldn't watch that opening because it was too realistic.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's like going on a roller coaster when you're not ready for it. I mean, that was tremendous. So this is preparing us for our discussion with Marra today. She is now in her career. We'll talk a little bit about her career direction, but now she is an executive producer.
Mm-hmm.
And most of our listeners probably don't know what an executive producer does. They raise the money, right? They raise the money. They oversee the creation of films or series or whatever, and they initiate the movie production process by getting the money.
They're the business side versus the producer, who might be more in the trenches with the director and the actors. And
there are some people who love movies so much that they put money into them even if they don't make much money. Like the Woody Allen team has always backed him, the same group of, Rafi and Jala. And those movies don't always make money, but they're always there to support them.
Right.
But in the old days, we're going to talk later when Mara's on about my uncle's movie, The Comancheros, which had a budget of $4.2 million. Now movies have $250 million budgets.
Yeah.
You got to put a lot of money at risk, to make a movie work these days.
OPM. You'd never put your own money into a movie. I've done that.
No, I know, and you know what happens.
We got it out. We did. We were lucky.
You were one of the few.
Very
few and fortunate.
Tell Kathy.
And she's been now, doing this since 2006. She started focusing on entertainment. She was executive producer on The Girl Most Likely, which had Kristen Wiig and Annette Bening and Matt Dillon. She was executive producer on The Inevitable Defeat of Mr. and Pete, which premiered at the 2013 Sundance Film Festival to critical acclaim, and it was screened at the White House.
And a great
had
score
music.
Of music.
Yeah, Alicia Keys. It had Anthony Mackie, Jennifer Hudson, Jordan Sparks. Had a really nice cast. She's working. We'll ask her about her new projects. But this is a Chicago-born woman who has migrated from Chicago to Hollywood and has broken into a very tough business. It's hard, as you know, to raise money for movies and to pick winners and to return investment money to shareholders. And we're going to ask about all that part of it. And just like last week, we talked to Mark about some aspects of the NFL that are more the business side of things. We're going to talk tomorrow about the business side of things. About being in Hollywood.
And let's talk to her about she's transitioning into television. Did she always do TV and film, or
no? She started off. She started off as a musical actress, theater actress in the 90s, and then when I first met her, came in contact with her, she was a fundraiser and working in the area of hospitality industry, biotech, and some other areas, and was just raising money for startup businesses. Mm-hmm. But I think her love and passion has always been, film and movies and entertainment, and now she's doing that full time.
Let's do a bunch of different things. Let's ask her about the people she knows in L.A. Let's pry into her personal and
if that's what you want to do this morning, that's what we're going to do. I know you love this, so let's go and do it.
All right, we'll be back on What Do You Know with Scott and Arnie with our guest, Marra Gad, right after this. That's a great place to start. Good morning, Marra. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good morning, Marra Gad. This is your life. How are you?
Oh, boy.
No. We were just talking before you came on the air about how tough it must be in Hollywood these days to raise money for projects. The money is getting bigger and bigger. The amount of, you take a look at what some of the films cost that have busted recently. You're talking about $250 million. I know you're not doing those kinds of films yet, but even in the smaller films like you've done before, Girl Most Likely or The Inevitable Defeat of Mr. and Pete, what was it like raising money for those projects?
It's very interesting. I will say two things. On those movies, my investors were actually last in. And those movies came together the way that a lot of independent films do. It takes truly a village of people / investors to make some independent films go. Nowadays, investors want to put their money into bigger budgeted movies. So whereas a movie like Girl Most Likely or Mr. and Pete, where the budgets were below $5 million, there are people now that are saying, no, if it's not, 8 to 12 million or 15 to 30 million, we don't want to look at it.
Is that right?
Yeah, and I think the notion remains that the bigger the budget, the bigger star you can have, which is absolutely true because you can afford more. And so the bigger chance there is for a return. I'm working on a film that I am tremendously, tremendously passionate about that we got a cast of amazing actors to attach to for almost nothing, like for less than their quotes. We can make this movie for less than $1 million. And it has been excruciating to try to get people to invest in that movie.
Because it's too because it's underfunded? Is that why?
No, it's not that. I think that there is a perception about what creates value out in our marketplace.
So big and sexy, trumps, pardon the pun, trumps small and modest, right?
Yes. And even if the business model for the smaller film is really quite solid, there is still for some people, not for all, but for some people, a desire to be in a bigger movie.
Right.
So it's an interesting. It is the Wild West.
So
sure.
So you born in
how'd you get
reared
started?
in Chicago. Before I get into getting started,
okay.
How she got started in this. Born in or grew up in Chicago because you were adopted, and we'll get that out of the way. You were adopted, so
yes.
You grew up in Chicago, and you spent most of your adult life living, east of the Mississippi, and now you're living in L.A. for the last couple of years. So tell me, what has surprised you the most about living in L.A. or working in Hollywood?
That I actually love it here. That is the most surprising
How did that happen?
thing.
Did you join the Church of Scientology? I mean, how did you decide to love Hollywood?
Because they're looking for a nice Jewish girl like me. No, I mean, look, I was born in New York. I was raised in Chicago, and I am absolutely London. I have partners and colleagues in London, and so I spend a lot of time there. And those kinds of cities have always been home for me, that are very urban, that, that have a cultural landscape that is different from here. But I got to tell you, I got out here, and on the business side of things, my life has become 100 times easier. It's like wanting to be president and not wanting to live in D.C.
Why is it easier?
Because everything's here. Everything is here. Everyone is here. And so even when I was in New York, where there is a very healthy entertainment business, it is still different / easier, for me at least, to conduct my business from here.
So what do you miss about Chicago?
Well, wait a minute. To the L.A. point, though, it's a whole industry. It's built around the entertainment industry. And why they went out west, right? You know the reason why the film industry, it was in New York.
Right.
Why?
Tell me.
You tell me.
You guys both better tell me. I feel like there's a joke coming.
Come on, Mara.
No?
You tell.
Tell us, Mara.
Why the film industry moved here?
Yes, in the 20s. In the 20s. I
mean, look, the studio system was really born here. And I think that's why the business built up around the studios that were here.
Right.
At the very least, there was the real estate to accommodate those studios. Manhattan never could have handled that.
But what else? It was the real estate, but what else?
I'm embarrassed. I don't know what the answer is.
Arnie. It's the light. It was light.
It was light to shoot outside because they didn't have big sound studios.
They didn't have big sound studios, so they needed that extra the extra light, and it was cheaper. And now, in New York, you didn't have that.
You've taught me something about my business.
Right.
I love that.
So what do you miss about Chicago?
Obviously, my entire family is in Chicago, and I am very close to them, so I miss that. I miss some of the food.
Like pizza, for example? They don't have good pizza out in L.A.
No, pizza, hot dogs, the super unhealthy, but I need it to live food.
And the Cubs and the Bears and the Illini. All of that.
Yes. I will never, ever, ever be an LA sports girl, ever. I am a diehard Cubs, Bulls, Bears, Hawks, and Illini fan. I'm a very proud alum of the University of Illinois in Champaign.
So let's get back to Scott's question. So how did you migrate from Chicago to L.A. and how did your career transform? Because when I first met you, you were coming out of event planning and moving into raising funds for startup companies.
Yeah, I worked as, and I sort of have to go all the way back to get to here. I graduated from college in 1989. I was 19 at the time, and I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be a musical theater actor. But back then, they weren't really doing mixed-race casting of any kind.
So what roles did you play in high school and college? Give us some examples of the roles that you played.
I sang Aquarius in Hair.
Oh, that's a good one.
I played
that's a good one.
Character Ron. I played King Herod in Jesus Christ Superstar.
Oh, good.
Which I'm tremendously proud of.
That's a good one to be a king. It's nice to be king.
Yes.
It's good to be king.
I didn't play Herod as a man. I can't believe I'm saying this on the radio. I played Herod as a dominatrix.
Oh.
That's
That's normal out here.
That's normal.
My parents were super proud.
Right.
I was in Little Shop of Horrors. I was in some original theater, and Chicago has an incredible theater community. Very special theater community.
Absolutely.
And so I did some original theater works there. But I did as much as I could given literally the limitations of the color of my skin.
Right.
Back in 1991, nobody was going to cast me in Oklahoma on Broadway.
Right.
You
didn't look like you'd fit in a Surrey with a fringe on top kind of role.
But it always does beg the question, and I think a lot of actors of color ask this question: why does it have to be?
Well, a good example is it's finally
cast.
It's finally transformed with Hamilton to a fully it's gone 180 degrees now.
Hamilton is by every account, a remarkable piece of theater, and a story that needed to be told in a way that only Lin-Manuel Miranda could have made it so accessible to people.
Well, plus now I hear they're going to be screening it or showing it to school kids.
Yeah,
before it even goes on the road.
Which is what I think is the most important thing, right? I mean, there are kids that need to be able to access theater like that, to be inspired by it,
right.
To know that they have a history they're not even tapping into, and that they have possibilities for themselves that they're not aware of.
Marra, speaking of the issue, let's talk about race for a second. So what was it like in Hollywood, or what was it like out there earlier in the year around the Oscar boycott? I mean, it was interesting. It was kind of listening to both parties talk and, certainly trying to state their case and their position. I don't know what happened, but it felt like it dissipated a bit, and I'm curious to know why that is, because it was it was a great point. There were so few, if any, films with people of color.
Look, there is. I think the best way for me to answer that is to simply say what I know to be true. If you do not have everybody in the room that might be qualified for the job, whether it's to direct or to act or whatever, then there's no way for things to be diverse, right? So if the director's list is all male, there's no way for there to be women or minorities included in if the people putting it together aren't saying, well, maybe we should look at these people. They're interesting too.
Well, let me ask you this. That's certainly true for the movie industry, but the point was made that in TV, on network TV, they're almost to some accounts there's a disproportionate balance towards non-whites in network TV.
Oh, I wouldn't call it disproportionate by any means. I will say that television in general, whether it's network TV or cable, Amazon and Netflix, has made TV an incredibly expansive place in every regard, right? So not just in terms of diversity, but in terms of storytelling, there is so much that's available. It actually makes it hard to cast movies sometimes because actors want so badly to work on television.
Well, plus television now is paying much more, competitive salaries for the major shows for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and it is, and again, creatively, it's this wildly expansive place where you can do absolutely anything. And television. So I wouldn't say it's disproportionately diverse by any means. I would say that it's what we should continue to aspire to do more of. Well, there are a couple of producers and showrunners that have really been at the forefront of that. Shonda Rhimes is certainly one of them. her casting director, Linda Lowy, is amazing in that they cast their worlds the way that the world looks.
Right.
You know, if you look at a Grey's Anatomy, it should not have been the shot heard round the world that Sandra Oh was cast to play a doctor. There are lots of Asian doctors in the world.
Sure.
No, and yet there it was.
Well, I want to talk a little bit more about television because you definitely transitioned from film to television. But let's just take a quick ID. You're listening to What Do You Know with Scott and Arnie on KGVO. Our guest is Marra Gad, film producer, entertainment executive entrepreneur. Mara, so
write that down, Mara, just so in case anybody ever asks you
I need to remember
again.
that. That's a fancy title.
Yeah, it's a nice title.
So you moved out to LA. What year did you move out to LA? Were you really, transitioning from being an actress, an actor, then to the business side? What year was that?
Yeah, I worked in finance for a long time, which is when Arnie and I crossed paths.
Okay.
And about 10 years ago, some of my investors that had real estate interests came to me and said, "We want to invest in movies."
Huh.
And I looked at them and I said, "Why on earth would you do that? I mean, that's really risky. You guys have a good thing going. Why would you do that?" And they said, "We have money that we can play with, and it looks like fun. We'd like to do that. Find us something to invest in."
So some people follow the rainbow to Hollywood. You followed the Benjamins.
I did, and
money.
And was their desire and interest one of financial interest, or were they more like interested in the folly of it all? Because there are people that are on both sides of that.
I mean, like the Woody Allen investors never make any money,
or people just like to go to parties. I mean, there's a lot of.
Look, I think people invest for all kinds of reasons. There are absolutely incredible entertainment. Film and television is a totally viable asset class if you understand the business and you're aligned with people who are creating healthy structures. It's a really viable asset class, and you can make money doing it.
So who are the
if you couldn't make money, people wouldn't do it.
Right.
But there are absolutely some people who invest because it is fun.
Sure.
Right. That exactly.
So who are the hardest people? Who are the hardest people? Not by name, but by category. Who are the hardest people to work with in your business, in your industry now? Who are the hardest to deal with?
That's a hard question to answer. I mean, I think, look, Hollywood is a microcosm of any world, right? And for me, it's really about the people. I have worked very hard to have relationships with people that I like and enjoy and trust. And so every once in a while, somebody will pop up, and you're like, "Ooh, that's a tough one to deal with."
Right.
But it's not centralized in any one.
Well, for example, on bigger films, you got to bring bankers in at some point. Are the bankers tough to deal with? They're always looking for collateralizable assets.
Not for me, because I can speak their language.
Oh, okay.
So if you can speak their language, then it becomes a much easier conversation. I think, look, sometimes it's an actor that's hard to deal with. Sometimes it's an agent. Sometimes it's an attorney. It really can be anything.
Well, it seems to the person who was on the outside looking in that there's a lot of huge, as Donald Trump, huge egos out in Hollywood to deal with, right?
Yes and no. I would say, again, for me, it is a microcosm of the world itself. I am tremendously fortunate to work with people that I am proud to also call my friends. And so I think it's about choosing your partners carefully. I prefer to work with the same people over and over again once we know that we have similar sensibilities, because that's how you avoid that other stuff.
So, well, that's interesting, right? You partner with who has done well by you, who's been honest. Right. Question. So when you got into film and you started to finance 10 years ago and you brought your investors in, the business was different then. I mean, this is
it's much different then.
Right. So,
absolutely.
So now, the theatrical release, the exhibitors represent a certain amount of the income if you can get a movie placed, correct? Or distributed, but there's all these other there's all these other lines of revenue that have
for example,
developed.
there are you turn on television, you turn on DirecTV, and they're premiering movies,
yes.
on
day and
TV,
date,
the day and day, right?
Day and date. But tell us, how has it changed in the 10 years?
Well, first of all, there was no Netflix.
Right.
10 years ago, right? Netflix really, when they came on the scene, they changed everything. So 10 years ago, we had the Napoleon Dynamites that were independent films that would go out and gross $160 million. But now that you don't have to go to the theater to consume content, people don't go. They go if they want to see a Marvel movie in 3D or IMAX. But for the dramas and the smaller comedies, people aren't going to the theater for that. It's gotten ghastly expensive to go.
Right.
For two people to go out for a nice dinner and go to the theater and see a movie, that can cost $100.
Even in Missoula. You're right.
Even in Missoula.
It's probably about $80, but it's true.
And so now with the advent of day-and-date releases, with iTunes, with Netflix, with Amazon, Hulu is doing amazing things. You can curl up on the couch with the one you love and your dog and some wine and not have people elbowing you in the ribs and watch what you want to watch.
Marra, so let's talk about the revenue streams. If 10 years ago, the theatrical release and distribution represented 60% of the revenue, and then pay-per-view and all the other channels represented 40%, what does it look like today?
Now it's a lot different. And again, it all differs based on what kind of movie you're trying to make.
Well, a rom-com. Let's talk about a romantic comedy. And
I would say to you, is it a studio movie or is it an independent film?
Let's call it an independent film. Let's build the model. So it's an independent film, a romantic comedy. The budget is $4 million.
If the budget is $4 million, the likelihood that you are going to get a star that will allow for not only theatrical interest in the movie, but also, people to put P&A money behind it to advertise the film.
Sure.
That's the other trick. Even if you get distribution, how much P&A are people putting up becomes the other question. So a $4 million film that's a rom-com will certainly rest on foreign sales. Foreign sales are a big part of how we figure out how to budget our movies and how to cast them a lot of times.
Is that right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So you're putting all Chinese stars in your movies now?
Look, there is a reason why that matters. The whole thing going on with Brexit is a huge. It's big for Hollywood as well, because there is a very close relationship between Hollywood and what goes on over in the UK. Right. British stars do incredibly well here. And as such, if I'm making a romantic comedy and I could on some amazing planet get Benedict Cumberbatch to star in my movie, that has huge foreign value.
Yeah, if he stars in your movie, I have a sneaking suspicion you're going to be in the movie as well.
No.
I just want her to finish the thought here, where the money goes. So let's say foreign sales, but now but Brexit screwed things up.
In a dream scenario, a budget is about, call it 25 to 30% tax incentives based on where you shoot the movie, around 25% equity, and then the rest is made up by foreign sales and or gap financing. That's the dream scenario.
So
and when you can set it up that way, the investors that, because tax incentive money and foreign sales can be bankrolled essentially, and you can often use debt to finance that.
Foreign sales represents distribution, not so much theatrical, right, but television and pay TV.
It can be. It all depends.
Okay.
It really all. I know I'm giving these sort of, if A, then C, then Q, then Z answers, but it really is that complicated. There is no pat formula anymore, and that would also probably be one of the other big changes in the last 10 years.
Right.
It was much easier to calculate these things broadly 10 years ago than it is now.
So, as an executive producer, what do you have to do that most people don't know?
Well, I have actually moved away from EPing and now am producing. And so when you're producing a film, it literally means that you are essentially assembling all of the pieces on the chessboard.
Right. So you're beyond money now. You've moved beyond money.
She's on set.
You're on set.
Money is a big part of what I do, but I am now involved from the very beginning. In certain instances, that means that a book is is under my company's, option.
You can
and
fire a director
who's going to do the adaptation of the script,
right?
And who's going to direct it and cast it, and there are 1,000 things that happen before the money.
Right, and you can fire the director, right, or the star, or do whatever.
So you're getting closer to the creative product, though. Is that right?
It is, and for me, I financed movies very quietly for a long time before I got into producing, and so I feel grateful that I got to learn the business of the business that way.
Sure.
But for me, there was nothing particularly enjoyable about just the finance. I needed the creative.
Sure. That's I have a story to tell you. An executive.
I love your stories.
I know.
Tell.
An executive producer story. So
okay.
In 1961, many centuries ago, my Uncle George was the executive producer of a John Wayne film called The Comancheros.
Oh, wow.
Which had a budget of $4.2 million, which doesn't sound like much today, but back in 61 was a pretty sizable budget.
Sure.
And $1 million of the $4.2 million was to pay John Wayne.
Mm-hmm.
So,
which is huge back then.
Yeah.
That's huge.
So one day my uncle gets a phone call from the Bank of New York. They're flying out to see him. They're nervous and worried about the movie. And they fly out to L.A. from New York, and they show up, and they're all in three-piece suits, and they say to him, I can't believe that we're paying $1 million for John Wayne. It's 25% of the budget. What guarantee do we have that this movie's going to make any money? And my uncle said, John Wayne.
That's right.
He had never been in a movie that had lost money.
Right.
He said the only guarantee you have that this movie is ever going to make your money back is by paying John Wayne $1 million. And the money and the picture, like every one of his other movies, made money and they got repaid.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the industry's changed an awful lot since then.
It has, and that's that's what has become so challenging, is that there is no rhyme or reason anymore. We can guess, right? We make a lot of really educated guesses about what this will do and what these stars will mean. But at the end of the day, there is very little rhyme or reason to what resonates for people, and so we do a lot of holding our breath and crossing our fingers and doing the best we can.
Well, it's also very seasonal, because if I look at the top 10 of what's hitting right now, we're potentially going into a third week. We're Finding Dory, the animated film, right?
Yes.
The sister project of Finding Nemo is number one at the box office. So, right, summer movies, kids are out of school,
Sure.
that or a superhero action movie is really what was always prescribed at this time of year.
Well, the movie industry has really changed from the sort of the Disney, Pixar perspective. There's so many more animated films now, and they're not necessarily
and
they're not necessarily because they're cheaper to make.
They're very expensive, and they're gorgeously made. I mean, if there is a sequence in the movie Up where there's actually no speaking, where you get to see the advent of their young childhood friendship all the way through when his wife dies, and it's so beautiful that it doesn't matter that it's an animated film that technically was designed for children. It's beautiful.
Well, there's I always liked. I've watched it several times. My favorite animated film is Wally.
Interesting.
And I always thought that had a great story and great animation. And great talent associated with it.
Last year, now the name of it is escaping me. Mindy Kaling, I can't believe the name of it's escaping me, but it was a beautiful animated film about a young girl and all of her feelings.
Right. Yeah. I know which one you're talking about, but I don't remember it either because I didn't.
There's too many movies. Well, let's first of all do an ID. This is What Do You Know with Scott and Arnie on KGVO. Our guest is Marra Gad. Executive producer, now producer of films, but
my title is changing.
But she is moving into television projects. Right? There's transitioning into television. So can you tell us?
And why are you doing that?
For a couple of reasons. One, like I was saying earlier, it is so expansive, and you can do more. You can do more on television in terms of how you get to tell a story, right? When you have a movie, you're pretty much limited to 90-ish minutes.
Right, but if you flip through the dial or flip through, there is now so much competing product on television. I mean, half the shows I see, more than half the shows I see advertised, I have no clue that they were on, what they're about. You know, every network is producing its own original programming. How do you how do you differentiate yourself?
Every network and platform.
Every platform. I mean, Netflix has their own. Amazon Prime's doing their own movies.
Right.
I mean, everybody's doing stuff. It just seems like so much of an overload that how do you even know the scorecard to figure out who's on first?
How do you manage your media?
Yeah, how do you manage that?
It's complicated. It's complicated. I'm very fortunate. I partner with a wonderful, wonderful man named Tom Verica. He is the producer director on Scandal on ABC, and we're developing a few TV shows together. So I'm really learning the business through him, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And
how did you connect with him, Marra?
I connected with him on a movie that he's going to be directing, and we're producing together. And so we got on very well and have similar sensibilities, and he is one of the best people that I know. And so we
is this a new acquaintance?
I mean, relatively. I've known him for a couple of years at this point.
So you can make real friends in Hollywood, right?
Yes, you can. And to sort of go back to a question you asked earlier, I have really lovely friends here. And the nice thing for me about living and working here is that most of my friends are in the business, but they also understand what that means in terms of lifestyle.
So where do you? I mean, I don't want the specific address because Scott will be stalking you. But where in LA? Where in LA do you reside now?
I live in a neighborhood called Hancock Park.
Oh,
right.
Which is it reminds me of the Upper East Side,
right.
Which is one of the reasons why I chose it. It's really beautiful. I live, a couple of blocks from a little area called Larchmont Village, which has some charming little restaurants and shops, and it's a very sweet neighborhood. I love it here.
So tell us about Tom Verica, TV projects. Now, when you start a TV project, do you have a network and or a platform in mind? Are you producing for a date and a release date and an air date? I mean, how does that work?
Definitely, it is a much different animal. So much like film, TV comes in all different, at all different places in the project's inception. There are some projects that I have that have pilot scripts and writers attached. There are others that are just ideas. Some are my ideas, Tom's ideas. Some are other people's ideas, and we come together to flesh that idea out and pitch just the idea. So it's a little bit of everything. And, Tom has a deal at ABC. So my situation is different from his. So as an example, if there is a pilot script that I think is amazing, my job is to say, okay, well, where are the places where a show like this can live?
Right.
So,
and so is it a cable show? Is it a network show? Is it this? Is it that? And so you start narrowing from there, right? There are some shows that are absolutely meant to live on cable because you don't want to have the kinds of boundaries that network television offers, although I would offer that network TV, right. I am still shocked by what
you can see on
network TV compared to the 70s,
Or even compared to the 90s. It's pretty amazing.
Arnie's a fan of TV, of great television, and you remember when The Sopranos in the 90s, right? And in the early 00s was winning all those Emmys, and everybody in the Academy or in the arts, they were complaining, God, cable's starting to take over network and winning more Emmys.
Right.
Now, cable's being dwarfed by the streaming platforms.
Netflix and Amazon,
Sure. Right.
I mean, Transparent did incredibly well. Transparent is an Amazon show.
Transparent.
Right.
What's the one with Kevin Spacey? The one
House of Cards.
House of Cards.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it just keeps going.
Right, and there'll be new platforms that'll supersede those.
Do you know what's interesting? I was reading that HBO, they changed over the head of programming at HBO. They've had a couple of stumbles over the last. I mean, this is HBO, stellar for 30 years, and really pioneered original programming.
Right,
has had some misses.
Sure,
believe it or not.
Another networks.
And they canceled vinyl.
Right. And then you got
predicted that.
You got Ray Donovan still plugging away on Showtime, for example, which is in the similar vein. Let me switch gears for 1 second.
Okay.
The inevitable defeat of Mr. and Pete was screened at the White House. What was it like going to the White House and doing that?
I wish I could tell you. I did not get to go.
What happened? You were screened out?
No, I mean, look, Michelle Obama became a champion of the film when she didn't like me. She didn't want me to go. No, Michelle Obama happened to see the film, and she is the one who brought it into the White House. And as you can imagine, the number of people invited was kept to a pretty small list, and it was used. It was used to sort of center, to anchor a conversation about education in our country.
Right.
So it wasn't just like they ate popcorn and watched the movie. It was really used for a purpose that we're all so proud of. So the lead producers, Jana Edelbaum and Rachel Cohen, got to go.
Right.
Rightfully so. Absolutely. But I did not get to go.
Okay, you were left out of that. What's the most high profile event you've gone to, red carpet kind of event that you've been to so far?
God, that's an interesting question. I mean,
one where you had to go pick out a special dress and have your hair done, and have your.
Well, that's a normal weekday for me, as you well know.
Yeah, when you go to Costco, you get dressed up like that.
You are a stunner.
Oh, you're very kind. I would say that, look, every film premiere is incredibly special, right? And they're like when Girl Most Likely premiered at the Toronto Film Festival, it was a special thing, and you're wearing a cocktail dress in the middle of the day,
right?
And seeing your name up on the big screen.
Let's talk about that for a minute. So Kristen Wiig and Annette Bening and Matt Dillon, they're all kind of, and even Darren Criss are experienced media people. Do they like going to those events, or do they just say, "Oh God, I have to go to that Toronto Film Festival and stand there and do that stuff"? I mean,
No. Look, I mean, what we get to do is a privilege, and I actually don't know anyone that doesn't view it that way.
Right. You're making fun.
And we work so hard to make a film come to life that's the cherry on top.
So they like that. They like that stuff.
Absolutely.
You're in the business of entertainment, which is a nice thing, and sometimes the stories are more serious, sometimes they're documentaries or dramas or whatever, but you're suspending someone's imagination for 3 hours or 2.5 hours or over a 10-episode series, right? You're taking them to another place. That's very magical. Question for you.
Yeah.
Is you're out there, you're doing this, you're enjoying it, you're kind of diversifying, doing TV and film, and you're acknowledging all the different platforms and the different channels of money. I'm curious to know whether the corporate advertisers and corporate marketers that want to leverage film and television to promote their products, is that a viable revenue stream that you are, looking to exploit as you develop these TV projects?
It's so interesting. That is not something that I personally have dealt in, but that's huge business. A friend of mine, her whole job at ABC on the scripted side is to handle all of those product placement things and the cars and the phones.
So you're going to have the Nookie Box products on one of your shows?
That would help them.
It all depends on the show.
And what platform it's being aired on.
But think about it.
But I mean, truly, there is huge money in that, both for it depending on the show. It's huge exposure for the product and huge money for the the production entity. So it's smart business, absolutely.
Are there projects or subject matter that you won't get involved with? That it's against your either religious, moral, or the
life story of Hitler.
No, well, is there anything that you've been presented with, or you've read a script that you just said, I'm not touching this?
Well, there are plenty of scripts where I'm like, I can't get past the 15th page, and I won't touch it. But
subject matter, not writing wise, but subject matter.
No, there really hasn't. I'm actually drawn very much to provocative content. So, the things that. I would say that I can't think off the top of my head of something that I would not touch. I can't name names because I'm trying to get the rights to something, but there is a tremendously provocative piece of theater that I'm in the process of trying to get my hands on that I think would shock a lot of people, assuming that I get it done. They'd be like, you really want to make this? So, I love storytelling in general, and I'm working on everything from a teenage horror movie to a love story between an older black woman and an older Orthodox Jewish man set in Brooklyn. There's to a story, about an African man who became a community organizer having spent his youth as a drug dealer. I am agnostic in that way. I want to tell good stories that are thought-provoking and leave the audience feeling something.
So, Marra, are you prepared as a producer to deal with an issue that I would find difficult to deal with, which is you're going to be working with young performers, young actors, actresses that are on their way up, maybe, and that are hot. Right. And you're also going to be dealing with people who had their best days.
Moments.
Yeah, had their moments and are on their way down, but still think they are,
on their way up.
Or up. Do you find that daunting at all? I mean, because there are egos involved here, and there is competition, and it's like dealing in any entertainment sports venue. You have the same problem being the coach of a sports team, for example, where you have young hot products and you have people that were superstars and maybe are even still on big contracts, but aren't what they used to be.
It's funny that you bring that up. We had a conversation that is rooted in that issue today, and I believe this to be true. I think that any time people treat one another, and this goes well beyond entertainment, I think any time we treat one another respectfully, and I don't mean that in a surface way. I think that if we come to one another as human beings and are respectful of that, then 99% of the time, even the hard conversations go well.
Okay.
And there are hard conversations that you have to have when you have to recast someone or swap out a director or something because your financier wants somebody else.
So I got a great storyline for you for a TV project here. Two East Coast guys in the witness protection program sent out to Montana, bored, and they start a radio. They start a radio show, and all of a sudden, people start listening to it, and they don't know what to do. Do you think that has the fundamental, pinnings for a TV series?
What are they on the run for?
Yeah, good question.
Yeah. Well,
Jews hiding out in Montana may have. Yeah. I mean, that could be.
Funny
that
you
could be
should
a whole
say
platform.
that. We're going. Arnie and I are going to a bris tomorrow night. Seriously.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Arnie knows. I used to joke that between knowing Arnie and Eric Stern, I felt like I was getting partway to a minion in Montana.
No. We have. There are two rabbis that Hasidic rabbis that are now domiciled in Montana, who are spreading the Lubavitcher word around the state. So we get sucked into that great vortex.
I'm going to tell you something. I grew up in the Reform movement myself, although my family was Orthodox, when my mom was little. And I went to Chabad when I was in Bangkok.
Yeah.
And it was
great,
spectacular.
Yeah.
It was spectacular, and it was wonderful. I had Shabbat dinner at the Chabad in Bangkok, and with people from all over the world.
So you're gonna have to tell our listeners this. We've talked about people of color, and you've related to that, and you've talked about Jewish heritage. So tell them a little bit about your childhood. We cannot leave the show without saying how did you get to be Marra Gad?
The short version of the story is that my parents could not conceive. It was 1968, 1969, and so they decided that adoption was a path for them, and they got the name of a rabbi in New York from one of our cousins who adopted two kids through this rabbi. And so my parents called the rabbi, and the rabbi said, "You know what? I have a girl. She's pregnant. The baby's due in April. You can have that baby." So my parents are out for dinner in April. It was my father's birthday. And they got the call that I had been born on my father's birthday.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
And they get on a plane and they fly to New York. And my father passed away 26 years ago. He was the most gorgeous, loving man on earth. But my mother to this day loves to tell the story. She's like, Marra, we get to the hospital and you're kept in this private nursery, because back then that's how it was done, with guards, right? Guards in front of the nursery door. And the lawyer handling the adoption goes into the nursery. And she said he kind of lost all the color in his face. And he looked at the nurse and said, are you sure that's the right baby?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And
that's because you were that's because you were playing the piano already.
Exactly. And the nurse said, that's the baby. My biological mother failed to disclose to her rabbi that she had clearly been having relations with a man of color.
Right.
And so, which I mean, look, in 1969.
Yeah, you didn't go around flaunting that even.
By the way,
New York.
did you ever track down your biological parents?
Oh no, absolutely not. Look, this is my family. I was meant. Wonderful. I believe that this is the family I was supposed to be. I was born on my dad's birthday, for God's sake.
Exactly.
This is my family. And I think for them, I don't even know if my biological father knows or not that I exist. But I think for her, she clearly, I was a secret for her, a big one.
Right.
Understandably so. And so the rabbi called my parents and said, you don't have to take her. You didn't sign up for this.
This is like your version of Bruno, where he trades his iPod for a baby. And
please stop comparing me to Bruno.
Yeah. And name the baby OJ.
Stop. But my parents said, no, that's our baby. Of course we're taking her.
And look how proud they must be of you now, gone all the way from there to Hollywood. Hollywood. No.
I am tremendously blessed, without question.
Yeah, you've been.
So that is how I ended up being a mixed race, born Jewish girl, who we had quite a journey in Chicago in the 70s and 80s and last week.
Yeah, right.
Are you writing your memoirs?
I am. Yeah, I am.
That's what you have a great story.
And so when you make it into a movie, who's going to play you? You have somebody in mind already? Alicia Keys,
No.
Alicia Keys, perhaps, or.
I should only be so lucky. I love Rashida Jones.
Yes.
Harvard.
There are only so many mixed race actresses of a certain age.
Right, yes.
And I'm definitely of a certain age at this point.
Yeah, but somebody has to play you as your younger version, right? So you can keep an eye out for some young talent out there.
Oh, I already know who could play me. There are these amazing girls. I actually am working with them. They're British, Lauren and Tamia Box, and they played young Belle in the movie Belle. Which was a gorgeous movie that Amma Asante made. And either one of those girls could play me.
And all the British actors and actresses can do American accents so well, like House, for example.
Much better than we can do the reverse, I'll tell you that much.
Exactly.
Well, look, unfortunately, we're coming up to the hour mark, and we are out of time, but you have been a wonderful, wonderful guest.
This has been very enjoyable,
Marra, delightful.
I am very, very flattered to have been on the show. I'm not going to lie, I was a little nervous. I was like, what are they going to talk to me about for an hour?
Well, that's for the next show. Don't you worry.
Yeah,
we're only scratching the surface of Marra Gad. Once you have a TV series on, we're going to bring you back and really grill you.
Exactly. We would love to do that.
It would be a thrill.
Are you open?
Anytime.
Okay, beautiful. Well, Marra Gad was our guest, and Arnie, I'll see you next Sunday.
See you next Sunday, Scott. Thank you, Marra.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to What Do You Know?
I can't wait for the next show, Scott.
I'm excited too, Arnie. If you'd like to suggest a guest, send me an email at scottrichmond@townsquaremedia.com. We'll see you next week. And thanks for listening to Newstalk KGVO, AM 1290, 1015 FM, and newstalkkgvo.com.